Hello and welcome back to Misfit Media, a podcast about queerness, disability, fatness and more, with a focus on personal experience, knowledge and intra-community topics. I'm your host Delta and my pronouns are they, them. Thanks for tuning in today. In this episode I'll be talking about whether physical disability and neurodivergence are actually as separate as people act like they are. So it's a common belief in our society that the body and the brain are separate, and thus also there's a clear line between neurodivergence and physical disability. You might know this when people just say about mental illness like, oh, this is just in your head, as if it's somehow not real. But disabled people also engage in the same line of thinking at times. There's a whole section of the disabled community that's kind of exclusionist in a way. They claim that neurodivergent people can be able-bodied, that any disabled person can be able-bodied, that there is a clear line between neurodivergence and physical disability. They claim that only physically disabled people can reclaim the word crip or cripple, and I have also seen people claim that there's almost like a neurodivergent privilege over physically disabled people. And this couldn't be further from the truth. Like the whole concept of the body-mind, aka the brain and the body just being connected, originates in disabled activism. So by saying that they are so separate, they are erasing disabled activism and engaging in this line of thinking that stems from our oppressors and not from us. They are also erasing the disabled activism in which all disabled people were included in the word crip or cripple and were allowed to reclaim it. I've read so many books by disabled activists that use the term crip for all disabled people and the term able-bodied for all non-disabled people. There is no clear line between physical disability and neurodivergence. Anything going on with the brain is a physical disability because the brain is part of the body. That the brain is part of the body is something that we keep fighting for. That the brain is somehow its separate entity, almost like a soul, is something that we are fighting against because it promotes ableist ideas. The fact that I am autistic, ADHD, and have CPTSD all show up in my brain if my brain was like taken out and actually looked at. Some of these even show up on brain scans. These are differences in the brain, physical differences in how my brain works, differences in how my brain, a physical part of my body, works. All of these are physical disabilities. But not just in that sense, but also just how they often affect other body parts too. Like it's well known that all kinds of neurodivergences can affect other body parts as well. Not for nothing we say that trauma lives in the body and that the body remembers. And when it comes to this neurodivergent people have privilege over physically disabled people talking point, I have seen people say that not all neurodivergent people are physically disabled, but all physically disabled people have some brain stuff going on, which is just bullshit. And this whole line of thinking that these are somehow separate is also just based in this weird idea that there's something fundamentally different between disabilities of this one body part, i.e. the brain, and disabilities of any other body part, and that non-brain disabilities somehow unite this whole group of people kind of against neurodivergent people, which is honestly so not true. The way my blindness affects my everyday life feels way more similar to how neurodivergence affects my life than it does to how, for example, a wheelchair user goes about their everyday life. But somehow me, a blind person, and a wheelchair user would be thrown in this non-brain disabled, physically disabled category that's somehow so different from all those brain disabled people. Like somehow we have this secret thing that unites us, that brain disabled people or neurodivergent people don't have, which is utter bollocks. And then there's the person who coined cripple punk, who has died, and they coined it to be exclusive to physically disabled people. They coined it in an ableist way. And when there's people who are cripples in a punk way and who are only neurodivergent and use the term cripple punk, they get shit for supposedly disrespecting the legacy of this person. If your legacy is ableism, it deserves to be disrespected. All disabled people have been called crip or cripple as an insult. The term mental cripple and emotional cripple exist for a reason. No disabled person is able-bodied. There's no such thing as an able-bodied disabled person. There's no line between physical disability and neurodivergence. The brain and the mind are part of the body. If you enjoyed this episode or even the entire podcast, please consider sharing it with a friend or on social media. You should also consider following Misfit Media on your preferred podcast platform, because that way you will never miss an episode again. If you're interested in buying some queer, disabled or fat pride merch, I have a shop on Spring called Freak Shop, and the link for that will be in the description. For everything else, such as my social media, the Misfit Media Spotify playlist, sending me a voice message, sending me anonymous questions, or my email, all of that can be found in the link tree in the description of this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, be safe.